G'day guys, Ziggy D here, and welcome back for my recap of Blizzcon Day 2, Diablo 3 Reaper of Souls, Part 2, because in the last one I talked about the Crusader and class changes coming up, but it was all too much from the panels that day to talk about in one video. So in this second video I'm going to be talking about what they revealed in terms of itemization, crafting, and legendaries, and some pretty exciting stuff here. I do have to admit that overall I'm disappointed that there wasn't more talked about at BlizzCon. Feels like the game is further away than we expected, but the things I did talk about are looking really good, and I'm still pretty excited for the expansion pack, just not expecting it anytime soon. So, the first thing they revealed was the Mystic. Now, of course, we've seen that the Mystic will be able to transmogrify and enchant items. Transmogrification was showed off, and basically you, once you've had an item at some point in your character's career, I guess, probably starting with the expansion pack, you can then always apply the look of that item to any other item you like. So, if you have a helmet you like the look of, then you can easily transmogrify that over your current helmet and keep the look of that forever. So collect up the items that you really like the look of for now, because you might want to transmogrify them in Reaper of Souls. So next up was Enchanting, and this is the big one that's going to be a big game-changing thing for Diablo 3 Reaper of Souls. And it's going to be a huge part of their strategy for getting people to mostly go self-found, to take away trading because they're taking away the auction house, and to make self-found just a lot more viable. And in fact, in their Q&A, someone asked, how they're going to deal with like the big flood of gold when the auction house shuts down, and they said that enchanting was a big part of it. It was also a big part of instead of implementing another trading system, which they might still do, they might not do. They seem to mostly be focusing on enchanting and making that as viable as possible for characters to do solo and to gear up their characters well. So, pretty interesting, but let's take a little bit of a deeper look at it. Enchanting allows you to select a property of an item and replace it with one of 3 random properties. So one of the options, so basically you have a stat on your sword or whatever that you don't like or you want to change, you can select that and you get 3 random properties. Now one of those options will always be the original stat that you wanted to replace it, so you can't actually go backwards. If you don't like the other 2 roles, then you just select the same stat you had before, and you're out a bit of money, you're out a bit of crafting materials and things like that. But you don't go backwards in terms of the actual item, so you're only ever going forwards or spending some money for the chance to go forwards. This is also repeatable as many times as you like, so you can, if you have this one item that has a lot of potential and you're really excited to create a story, create this own legendary yourself, this item that ends up being perfect eventually, you can spend as many times and as much gold and resources as you want trying to re-roll it over and over again until you get that perfect combination of perfect stats that you want. And that's pretty fun. I've seen things like that in Path of Exile, and it makes for some pretty epic tales and for some pretty epic items, so I think this will have a lot of potential to be a lot of fun in Reaper of Souls. Now, the amount of gold also seemed, from the brief videos they showed, it seemed to be quite high, so it should be a pretty nice gold sink. But this might be something that changes over time. They might have to rebalance it based on, some players won't have a bunch of gold, and lots of players will have a lot of gold from the auction houses. So they kind of have to make it so it's suitable for both players. The people who have a lot of gold now, they'll be able to use it a bit more, but it should still be viable for people that didn't participate in the auction house before to use. It should still be viable for them. So next up, they talked about Loot 2.0. They talk about 3 main principles behind Loot 2.0, and that feeds into the rest of the things we'll talk about here. It's the idea of less is more, so less items dropping, but having better quality items that are, potentially better for your character is much more rewarding. So rarer drops, but those drops are much better, and I think that's a good thing as well. We've seen recently the same sort of thing happen with Path of Exile, where they've removed, they've lowered the amount of items that drop, and it seems to be a pretty good change in that game, and it should be a good change in Reaper of Souls Diablo as well. And the next tenet of the Loot 2.0 was items support builds, and we've seen this from some of the legendary affixes coming, and it's also happening on rares as well. Rares are having a much higher chance to roll stats that will support you in your build, reducing your cooldowns or changing the way helping skills function better, whereas legendaries will change the way skills function. So the items in general are all going to be going into supporting your build, not just being a math problem or something like that you can solve to get higher DPS. Math problem, solve for DPS. Instead of that, we're looking at items that are going to help shape your build, which is pretty exciting. And then the final tenet of Loot 2.0 was rarity equals power. So they want to make the rarer the item, the more powerful it is. You know, that makes sense with white, blue, and rare items, but often legendaries have not been much more powerful, or they've been much worse than rare items. We're actually seen a bit of a shift towards legendaries being better, so I think the game's already at a pretty good state of this. And honestly, I believe that the best items should be rares. I think the most impossibly perfectly rolled rares should always outmatch legendaries. But I don't know, it seems like they want to make legendaries always the end game, always the best. And I guess if there's different ways of rolling legendaries, and because we're going to be able to craft on legendaries as well, maybe this will still be interesting, but we'll see how that plays out. I'm a little bit unsure about this last one. So, Loot 2.0 Smart Drops. Smart Drops is a big part of Loot 2.0, and this kind of focuses in on items supporting your builds and the less is more tenets. Basically, the following things are chosen based on the class that you're playing at the time of the drop. So this is item type, so if you're a barbarian, you know, you're going to have axes more than crossbows. Item stats, so you're going to have strength more often as a barbarian, and skill affixes, so you're going to more likely have your items that drop for you roll things that support the actual skills you can use. So as a barb, you're pretty unlikely to get a crossbow with a witch doctor talent on it, so that's pretty good. Now, overall, this smart drop thing is that each item has a chance to be a smart drop. So you will still see some items that are good for your ults or good for friends, or, you know, I guess just vendor trash. But I think that's actually pretty important. Not every item should be a smart drop, and that seems to be something they agree with, and they don't want to do that as well. Because I think it's really fun to have an item drop that's amazing, but not good for your character. And then you're like, okay, this is an amazing wizard item. I'm going to roll a wizard just to use this item, or I have a wizard friend I can trade this to or give this to. And I think that's a really exciting part of any action RPG, so it's good that they're sticking with that. Now, next up is stat grouping, and this is a new announcement to Reaper of Souls. We didn't really see anything about this in the data mining, at least to my knowledge. But basically, stat grouping is that there's now primary and secondary stats on items. Primary, as you would expect, are your main stats: crit, attack speed, all of that sort of stuff, all the main things you want on items usually. Secondary stats are magic find, pickup radius, run speed, all those extra sort of things, you know, health globes and all that sort of stuff. These are the things that you sometimes want in your build, but you don't want to sacrifice these other stats for. So often, you know, you'd have a choice, you know, I want to get magic find on my gear, but I don't want to drop crit chance to do so. Well, with this stat grouping, it means that these two things are separate. So getting magic find or getting move speed or getting pickup radius on your gear is not going to take away from you having a chance to get strength, crit, attack speed, and all that sort of stuff. So these two things are independent, and actually on the item tooltips themselves, they're even separated out now to give you that sort of a visual representation of how these things are separate. Now, in terms of crafting, this is actually pretty important in terms of enchanting, because you enchant these things separately as well. So if you're rolling one of your main stats, you're not going to have like magic find appear on that. You have to re-roll your secondary stats to be able to get magic find, or add a secondary stat, I guess. But these things are separate in both crafting and drops, so you have more chance to add these secondary stats to your build without it taking away from the core stats. So it should make itemization a bit more satisfying, I think, in Diablo. We'll see how it plays out, but I think this is a pretty good addition, and I'm pretty excited for it. Next up, they started talking about legendaries. This was actually a pretty big focus, and, you know, legendaries are the amazing items that you play these games for, so we should have an appropriate focus on legendaries. Legendaries are now planned to be the end game items, so, you know, the thing is chasing this like a set for your character that's going to be perfect, or the perfect legendary for your character. And this makes sense. It was something that was present in Diablo 2. You know, there was still those rares that are really good, and I kind of hope that's still the case, where you still use a few really good rares. But it seems like legendary is going to be, you know, the main gear goal in terms of things that you chase, and that's fine. That makes sense to me. They want, you know, them to be rare, so it kind of sounded like from the way they were talking that they want it to actually be rarer than it is now, because they have increased the drop rate of legendaries to a pretty substantial degree. So maybe they want to go back to a system where it's a bit rarer, but probably not as rare as it was before. So we'll see how they balance that out and what they're doing, but it sounds like they want to change things a little bit. But they want them to be more powerful as a result. So that makes sense. If you're going to make them more rare, make them more powerful and more epic when they do drop, which is important, I think, for a legendary item. They also want to do an improvement pass over all of the existing legendaries, which is pretty exciting because there's a lot of really cool stuff in there that just can't really get used because it's not very good at the moment. So this includes legendaries that drop now will drop at monster level and scale based on that. Now this is something that's present in Diablo 3 on console and it works really, really well. You have, once an item can drop, maybe it has a minimum drop level of 34, level 34. From level 34 onwards, that item will drop and scale to the level you're at. So if that item drops at level 70, it will be a level 70 item with stats matching that. So this improves the amount of time that you can use these different legendaries and makes these legendaries scale with the game and just makes more legendaries available to your character as well, which means more build options because these also have unique affixes on them. So next up, they are also rebalancing the stats on existing legendaries as well, mostly making them more powerful, it sounds like. And then they're adding new powers to existing legendaries as well, so bringing out the theme better in some of these old items. Now, they did highlight Frostburns as an item showing off what they were doing. The Frostburns they showed in Reaper of Souls had better stats. It also had a new orange affix, which is designed to give your gameplay and build change. So on the Frostburns, I think it was giving your chill a 50% chance to freeze. So this can change your build by quite a bit. And another interesting change that was kind of shown off here, and this is across all items, is that you can now see the stat range that items could roll by mousing over the item and holding Alt, and that appears in the grey text there, and you'll see that in the picture up on screen, hopefully. They also showed off a series of other legendaries, which looked more in line with what I would like to see from, legendaries in Diablo 3, so that's pretty exciting, looks pretty promising. They even showed off some ones that kind of look like they were in there as fan fodder for WoW fans and things like that, fans of other Blizzard games, so kind of putting some Easter eggs in there as well, but some pretty cool looking legendaries, and I think overall the loot changes are looking really, really good. The itemization stuff, the enchanting, I was really happy to be able to see enchanting in action and see how that works, and I think the way they've done it actually looks really, really good. So I'm pretty excited. As I said, I'm still really, really excited for the Reaper of Souls expansion pack. Just hoping to get some more info soon, but I think we probably won't get too much more in the near future. Maybe towards Christmas they'll start releasing some more details on things like Devil's Hand and ladders and all that jazz that we want to hear about. And then, hopefully, maybe sometime next year we'll have a beta and release of the game. Anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed my BlizzCon recaps. I'm Ziggy D, and thanks for watching.